Hello, I'm Jason. I'm a tutor at Chegg Tutors. Link to my profile is below. Today we're going to be talking about activity-based costing, and we're going to compare it to traditional costing. I'm going to use this example here. Matt Company uses activity-based costing. The company has two products, A and B, and their production and sales of product A is 9,000 units, and product B is 7,500 units. There are three activity cost pools with total cost and total activity as follows. And then after that, we're going to assume instead that all costs are allocated on the basis of activity 1. And what this means is an activity is something that a bunch of costs have in common. So if there was one machine and there was specific parts that only got ran on that machine, and the parts had special oil, had inspection requirements, etc., we would lump all those things into one cost pool, and the activity in that case would be, say, number of parts produced. So overhead is essentially stuff that we want to group together and measure together, because trying to measure it individually would be way too tedious and time consuming. And so activity-based costing attempts to do that. It attempts to lump all costs that are similar together and apply those costs on some estimate that they believe moves in proportion to the overhead. So let's say we have activity 1 and it has total cost of $29,295, and between product A and product B it uses a total of 630 of the hours. Our cost per unit of activity for activity 1 would then just be $29,295 divided by 630, and that gives us a cost of 46.5 per unit of our activity. And we would use that same process for activity 2. We would take our 46,895 total cost and divide by our total activity of 1,130 to give us a cost of 41.5 per unit of our activity. And same with activity 3, we take 130, 315 divided by 380, 3890 to get 33.5. And then once we have our cost per activity, we'd have to then assign the overhead costs to each product based on how much of the activity they use. So in activity 1, product A uses 220 units, and we know our cost per unit is $46.5. So we would take 220 times $46.5 to get our total cost of activity 1 assigned to product A. And we would do something similar with product B. We would take the 410 here times the 46.5 to get the 19,065 total cost of activity 1. Now the 19,065 and the 10,230 should add together to get the 29,295. That's how you know you did it correctly. And we'd basically do that down the chain. So activity 2, our cost is 41.5, and product A had 910 units. And so we would take $41.5 times 910 units to get 37,765, and then 220 times 41.5 for our product B activity cost. And once we have the totals of all three activities, we would just total those up to get our overhead for product A, which would be 76,135, and then for product B it'd be 130,370. And if we want to do cost per unit, we would simply divide by number of units. So for product A, we have 76,135 overhead cost divided by 9,000 units, which would give us a total of 76,135 divided by 9,000 of 8.46. 8.46 cost per unit. And likewise for product B, we would just do 130,370 total cost divided by 7,500 units, which is given up here, 9,000 units, 7,500 units. And so each unit we produce would cost us $8.46 of overhead in the case of product A, and $17.38 in the case of product B. Now, This compares to a traditional cost system in that a traditional cost system only uses one activity base, or a very few number of activity bases. Back in maybe 10, 20 years ago, most machining companies used direct labor hours as an activity base to sign off. The problem with that was that as the processes became more and more automated, you had more machine hours and less direct labor hours. The only time you had a lot of direct labor hours was when you were doing small jobs that it was too costly to automate. You would have to have die changes and everything, and that would just be tedious. So a lot of small jobs people did by hand, and when you're allocating overhead only based on direct labor hours, the jobs with a lot of labor hours are going to incur a lot of overhead costs, and the jobs that are very highly automated aren't going to incur very much in overhead costs. So it was a very inaccurate way of costing. The small jobs tended to look a lot more expensive, and the big jobs tend to look a lot cheaper. And so you had the small jobs subsidizing the big jobs essentially, and a lot of people were finding that they were losing money and they couldn't figure out why, and that's why, because their costs were inaccurate. And so, for instance, if we're using a traditional cost system, let's say that we were allocating overhead on the basis of this 630 total for activity 1. And so our total overhead is the sum of these three. That would be our 206, 505. And if we divide that by the 630 units of activity in activity 1, that would give us 327.79 overhead per unit of activity for a traditional cost system. Now, if we would apply this to product A, we would just take the 220 activity 1 product A times our 327.79 to give us a total overhead for product A of $72,112. That breaks down per unit to be $8.01 per unit. We would do something similar with product B, 410 being right here, times our 327.79 to give us 134,393.9. When we divide that by the 7,500 units, that would give us a cost per unit of 17.91. Now we can compare this to the activity-based costing, and we can see a significant difference here. So essentially, product A is cheaper under a traditional cost system than under ABC costing, and product B is more expensive under a traditional cost system than under ABC costing. So you'd be charging too little for this job and too much for this job if you were just relying on ABC or on a traditional cost system, which is why people implement the ABC system so they can more accurately track their costs. And ultimately, it's a step up above traditional cost systems, and so you're going to see that most people use activity-based costing rather than traditional costing, assuming overhead is a significant portion of total material cost. If it's only maybe 5%, 10%, then it probably doesn't matter too much how you allocate it. You could probably just allocate it how you like, but if it's 20, 30% of total product costs, it's something you need to be careful about. And I hope I've explained the basics of ABC costing and how it differs from traditional costing. My profile link is below. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me. Thank you.